I lost my wife once in the hospital room. I lost my life again in the driveway after her funeral. The first loss was quiet. Machines humming. A nurse adjusting a blanket. Her hand in mine, already colder than it should have been. The second loss was loud in a way that didn't involve sound at all. Just a door closing behind me, a sentence spoken too cleanly, too confidently, by a man I once helped raise. The cemetery was still clinging to me when we got back to the house. That smell of damp earth and wilted flowers followed us all the way home, like grief refused to stay buried. I remember standing at the edge of the driveway, keys in my hand, unsure whether I was supposed to go inside or wait. 40 minutes earlier, I'd been her husband. Now I wasn't sure what I was. People had hugged me at the funeral. Men I barely knew clasped my shoulder and said things like, "Stay strong," or, "She's at peace now." I nodded, thanked them, did what a man is supposed to do when there are no words left. But strength feels different when you're alone. It feels heavier, less heroic. Inside the house, the air was wrong. Too quiet, too clean. Every picture of her felt louder now. Her laugh still lived in the walls. Her favorite mug sat untouched by the sink. I stood there, jacket still on, shoes still dirty from the cemetery, and wondered how a place could feel like home and exile at the same time. That's when my stepson cleared his throat. He didn't look at me right away. He was pacing, phone in hand, jaw tight like he'd been practicing what he was about to say. I knew that posture. I'd seen it when he was 17 and asking for money he hadn't earned. When he was 25 and blaming his boss for another missed promotion. Back then I'd stepped in, smoothed things over, paid the difference, told myself this was what fathers did. He finally turned to me. "We need to talk," he said. 3 words. Controlled. Like he was calling a meeting at work. I nodded. "Okay." He gestured toward the living room. The couch where she and I used to sit on Sunday mornings, drinking coffee, not talking much, just existing together. I didn't sit. Something in me already knew this wasn't a conversation meant to be shared. He inhaled, then said it. "The house is mine now." I waited for the rest of the sentence. Some kind of explanation. A qualifier. A pause that said this wasn't what it sounded like. Nothing came. "I don't understand," I said. My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. He shrugged. "It's in the will. Mom left it to me. Everything, actually. Everything." The word echoed. The house. The accounts. The life we built piece by piece while he was busy becoming an adult who still needed saving. "I helped pay for this place," I said quietly. Not accusing. Just stating a fact. "For years." He nodded again, impatient. "I know. But legally, it's mine. And I need you to move out." Move out. Not leave. Not take some time. Move out. Like I was a tenant whose lease had expired. "When?" I asked. "Tonight would be best." Tonight. I stared at him. Really stared. This man I'd defended in arguments. The boy whose bike I'd fixed, whose college fees I'd covered when his mother cried at the kitchen table, worried she'd failed him. He wouldn't meet my eyes now. "I just buried my wife," I said. He exhaled sharply, irritation leaking through the mask. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Harder. Something in my chest cracked then. Not loudly. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Just enough for me to feel it. I wanted to shout. To list everything I'd done. Every late night. Every sacrifice. Every time I'd chosen peace over authority because I loved her and, by extension, him. I wanted to demand respect, gratitude, time. Instead, I heard her voice in my head. "Promise me you won't fight him." She'd said it months earlier, when the doctors had started using softer voices and longer pauses. We were alone. The lights were dim. She squeezed my hand and looked at me the way she did when she needed me to be stronger than I felt. "He's all I have left," she'd whispered. So I swallowed everything. I nodded once. "Okay," I said. That was it. No argument. No plea. Just a single word that tasted like surrender. He looked relieved. Like he'd expected resistance and was grateful not to deal with it. He handed me a folder, documents, copies of the will, printed authority. "You can take your personal things," he said. "But That's it. I went upstairs. Our bedroom felt like a crime scene. Half the closet was still hers. Dresses she'd never wear again. Shoes lined up neatly, waiting for a woman who wasn't coming back. I packed without thinking. Clothes. Toiletries. A framed photo from a vacation we took before life got complicated. I paused at her nightstand. There was a folded note taped inside the drawer. My name written in her handwriting. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I closed the drawer. I wasn't ready. Downstairs, he stood by the door, keys already in his hand. Ownership made him taller somehow. Straighter. I'll change the locks tomorrow, he said. Just to be safe. I stepped outside. The air was cold. The sky already darkening, like the day was eager to end. I set my bag in the trunk, then stood there, hand on the car door, realizing I had nowhere to go. No home. No wife. No place in the life I thought I'd built. As I pulled away, I looked once in the rearview mirror. The house glowed softly, warm lights behind curtained windows. It looked peaceful. Complete. Like I'd never been part of it at all. What I didn't know, what none of us knew yet, was that my wife had never been careless. And she'd never left loose ends. I drove into the night believing I'd lost everything. I was wrong. The first night, I slept in my car. Not because I wanted to. Because my body shut down before my pride did. I pulled into a dimly lit parking lot behind a closed grocery store, killed the engine, and just sat there with my hands on the steering wheel. The silence pressed in from every side. No television humming. No clock ticking from the kitchen wall. No soft breathing beside me reminding me that I wasn't alone. I rested my forehead against the wheel and laughed once. A short, broken sound. The kind that escapes when crying feels too exposed. 48 hours earlier, I had a home. Now I had an address made of asphalt and painted lines. I tried to stretch out in the back seat, but everything hurt. My knees, my back, my chest. Grief isn't just emotional. It's physical. It weighs on you, pulls you downward, makes even breathing feel like effort. I stared at the roof of the car and let the memories come, because fighting them only made them louder. Her voice. Her laugh. The way she used to reach for my hand in her sleep, like she was afraid I might disappear if she let go. I didn't sleep much. Every time my eyes closed, I saw the house. The living room light. Him standing there, holding keys that used to jingle in my pocket. By morning, my phone was buzzing. I ignored it. Friends, coworkers, people who meant well. People who would ask where I was staying, what my plan was, how I was holding up. Questions I didn't have answers to yet. Because men like me are supposed to have answers. We're supposed to know where we're going. What we're doing. How to fix things. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't. I drove aimlessly, stopping only when my stomach started to ache. I grabbed a coffee from a gas station and drank it standing beside my car, watching other people come and go. They all seemed to know exactly where they were headed. I checked my bank account. Not empty, but suddenly fragile. Enough to survive. Not enough to feel secure. Not enough to feel like a man who still had control over his life. I booked the cheapest motel I could find. The room smelled like old smoke and disinfectant. The carpet felt damp. The bed creaked when I sat down, like it was tired of holding weight too. I dropped my bag and sat there, hands on my knees, staring at the wall. This is what disposable feels like, I thought. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just quietly removed. I showered longer than necessary, letting the hot water hit my shoulders until my skin turned red. For a few minutes, it felt like being held. When I stepped out, the loneliness rushed back in. I wrapped myself in a thin towel and caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked older. Smaller somehow. Like the version of me that had always been useful had finally expired. That thought scared me more than being homeless. Because if I wasn't useful, then what was I? My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. A voicemail notification. From a lawyer. I didn't open it. I already knew what it would say. Legal confirmations. Cold language. Proof that what he did was allowed. I wasn't ready to hear that. I spent the afternoon walking aimlessly, hands in my pockets, watching my shadow stretch and shrink on the pavement. I thought about all the years I'd spent building stability, for my career, for my marriage, for a family that wasn't technically mine but felt like it was. And how quickly it had all been erased. Men aren't taught how to grieve losing relevance. We're taught how to grieve death. But not replacement. Not being told, in so many words, that your presence is no longer required. That night, I lay on the motel bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it rattled through uneven rotations. I thought about calling someone. Anyone. But pride is a stubborn thing. And shame is louder in the dark. I remembered the first time I met my stepson. He was 14. Arms crossed. Suspicious eyes. Testing me. I tried too hard back then. Bought approval instead of earning it. Paid for things I shouldn't have. Let moments slide because confrontation felt like failure. I told myself it was love. Maybe it was. But love without boundaries teaches people how to use you. That truth settled heavy in my chest. Sometime after midnight, I sat up suddenly. A memory surfaced. Years ago, during a late-night paperwork session at the kitchen table, my wife had slid a folder toward me. "Just sign here," she'd said casually. "What is it?" I'd asked. "Boring stuff," she'd smiled. "Estate planning. In case something happens." I trusted her. I'd always trusted her. The thought wouldn't leave me. I reached for my phone. Listened to the voicemail. The lawyer's voice was calm. Professional. Almost kind. "Please call me back," he said. "There are a few details regarding the will that require your presence." Require. Not optional. I stared at the phone long after the message ended. For the first time since the funeral, something shifted inside me. Not hope. Not yet. But curiosity. And curiosity is dangerous when you've already lost everything, because it gives you a reason to stand back up. I lay back down, eyes open, heart beating just a little faster than before. Tomorrow I decided I would show up, not as the man who had been discarded, but as the man who still deserved to know the truth. There's a special kind of pain that comes from being rejected by someone you chose. Not blood. Not obligation. I woke up in the motel just before sunrise, the room still wrapped in that gray half-light where everything feels unfinished. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then the ceiling fan rattled, the smell of stale detergent crept back in, and reality settled on my chest like a weight. I sat up slowly and rubbed my face. My hands felt older than they used to, rougher, heavier. Hands that had built things, fixed things, paid for things. Hands that had held a boy's bike steady while he learned to ride. That thought pulled me backward in time. I met him when he was 14. All elbows and attitude. Arms crossed like armor. He stood in the doorway of his mother's apartment the first night I came over for dinner, staring at me like I was an intruder instead of a guest. "So," he said, looking me up and down, "you're the guy." I smiled, nervous. "I guess I am." He didn't smile back. I knew then that if this was going to work, if I was going to love his mother and share a life with her, I'd have to earn my place. Not demand it. And I tried. God, how I tried. I showed up. Soccer games. Parent-teacher meetings. Late-night rides home when he didn't want to call his friends. I paid for braces. Covered the gap when scholarships fell short. Told myself that stepping in quietly was better than stepping on toes. When he got into trouble, I smoothed things over. When he failed, I softened the consequences. Every time his mother worried she was being too hard on him, I stepped in and said, "He's figuring it out. He just needs time." I thought I was protecting him. What I was really doing was protecting the peace. In the motel bathroom, I splashed water on my face and studied my reflection. The man staring back at me looked tired, but not weak. I'd mistaken the two for too long. I remembered the night he dropped out of college. He'd come home late, shoulders slumped, eyes sharp with defensiveness. His mother cried at the kitchen table. I stood by the counter, arms crossed, listening. "I just don't see the point," he'd said. "Everyone else is getting ahead because they know the right people." His mother looked at me, searching for reassurance. And I gave it. "It's okay," I said. "We'll figure it out." We always figured it out. Or rather, I did. That pattern repeated itself for years. Jobs he quit. Opportunities he wasted. Conflicts he escalated and never resolved. I paid. I waited. I forgave. And every time I told myself this was what being a good man looked like. Standing there now, in a bathroom that wasn't mine, it finally hit me. I had never asked him to grow. I had made it optional. The realization didn't come with anger. It came with a deep, aching sadness. Not just for myself, but for him. Because I'd loved him in a way that required nothing back. That kind of love feels generous. Until it isn't. I sat on the edge of the motel bed and remembered something my wife once said, years before she got sick. "He doesn't listen to me," she'd whispered one night after an argument with him. "But he listens to you." I'd shrugged it off. "I don't want to be the bad guy," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. "Sometimes," she said softly, "being the bad guy is how you teach someone to stand on their own." I hadn't understood then. I did now. Loving someone doesn't mean absorbing all their weight. It means teaching them how to carry their own. That truth sat with me as I checked out of the motel and drove with no destination in mind. The city passed by in fragments, coffee shops opening, people heading to work, lives in motion. I felt disconnected from all of it. But I also felt clearer. For the first time, I wasn't asking what I'd done wrong. I was asking what I'd allowed. My phone buzzed again. The lawyer. This time, I answered. "Thank you for calling back," he said. "We need to schedule a time for you to come in. Preferably soon." "Why?" I asked. There was a pause. "Because," he said carefully, "your wife was very specific." Specific. The word landed differently than everything else I'd heard since the funeral. "I'll come in tomorrow," I said. After I hung up, I pulled over and shut off the engine. I sat there, hands resting on the wheel, breathing slowly. For the first time since she died, I felt her presence, not as absence, but intention. She'd known. About him. About me. About the imbalance we'd lived with for years. And suddenly, I understood something that brought tears to my eyes. She hadn't left me unprotected. She had been quietly preparing me to stop protecting everyone else. As I drove away, one thought stayed with me, steady and grounding. I didn't lose a son. I lost the version of myself who believed love meant erasing my own worth. And whatever waited for me in that lawyer's office, I was finally ready to face it standing up. I didn't answer my phone at first. Not because I didn't recognize the number. Not because I didn't care. I just wasn't ready. There's a moment after losing everything where every ring, every buzz, feels like judgment. Like the world is reminding you that you're still in it, still obligated to respond, still expected to move forward when your heart hasn't even caught up. The lawyer left a voicemail. Polite, efficient. Not the kind of voice that tells you what's coming, just the kind that makes you feel like you'll regret ignoring it. I sat on the edge of my motel bed, letting the sound echo in my head. The ceiling fan creaked above me. The room smelled faintly of old coffee and cheap detergent. Outside, the city began waking up. The sound of tires, distant conversations, a bird somewhere searching for its morning. I felt small. Not in a physical sense. Not like I was shrinking. But like my purpose had been erased, and no one had bothered to leave me a map. I considered letting the message sit there. Ignored. Untouched. Untitled in its silence. But something in the lawyer's tone, neutral, calm, almost deliberate, made me pick up the phone. "Hello." My voice came out hoarse. Vulnerable. A little unsure. "Thank you for calling back," he said immediately. "We need to schedule a time for you to come in. Preferably soon." "Why?" I asked. My fingers clenched the edge of the bed. My pulse quickened. The words sounded sharper than I intended. Another pause. He inhaled. "Because," he said slowly, carefully, "your wife was very specific." Specific. That word alone stirred something inside me I hadn't felt since the funeral. Curiosity. Uneasy curiosity, but curiosity nonetheless. I said, "I'll come in tomorrow." After hanging up, I sat back and let the silence in the room press against me. I thought about her. The way she had always been the one to anticipate everything. To plan for the worst while I handled the present. I thought about the folder she'd slid across the kitchen table years ago. The one I'd dismissed as boring legal stuff. The one I'd signed without question because I trusted her. Now that trust felt heavier. Weighty in a way that could either crush me or steady me. I went outside and sat in the car for a while. The sky was pale, just beginning to lighten, and the streets were starting to hum with the rhythm of normal life. People were heading to work, some walking briskly, others strolling, a dog on a leash, a coffee in hand. Their purpose was obvious. My purpose was not. I thought about him, my stepson. How he had stood there in the house, confident, holding keys that no longer had meaning for me but held meaning for him. I remembered his voice, the cold efficiency in it, the way he didn't glance back at me when he told me to leave. That memory pressed against me like a wound that hadn't scabbed yet. And yet, there was something beneath it. Something that I hadn't noticed at first. Fear. Not just his, but mine as well. A fear that the truth, whatever it was, would change everything again. I drove without thinking, letting the roads guide me aimlessly. Each stoplight, each turn, each passing street seemed to mirror my internal indecision. I didn't know what to expect when I arrived at the lawyer's office. I didn't know whether I would be angry or relieved, fearful or vindicated. All I knew was that I had to show up, and that in itself felt like a small victory. When I finally parked in front of the building, the mid-morning sun glinted off the glass windows, sharp and almost sterile. I stepped out of the car and adjusted my jacket. Hands in pockets, chest tight, eyes scanning the entrance. This was just an office. Just a room filled with papers and people who spoke in legal jargon. And yet it felt monumental. Inside, the lawyer was waiting. Calm, as always, and professional. He handed me a folder. No words yet. Just the weight of what it might contain. I could feel the anticipation building in my chest, a slow burn that made my stomach ache. He motioned to the chair opposite him. Please sit. I did, careful not to let my shoulders slump. Not yet. Not now. This was the moment before revelation. The calm before understanding. Everything is in order, he began. Your wife was meticulous. She wanted to make sure you were provided for, even in ways she didn't explicitly discuss with others. My pulse quickened. I shifted slightly in the chair, leaning forward. Every sentence, every word, held the potential to change my life again. There are certain specifics, he said. Details she was very particular about. It's why I needed to reach you. I nodded slowly. My mind raced through years of memories, of choices I'd made, of sacrifices I'd quietly absorbed. And suddenly, the thought hit me, maybe I hadn't lost everything. Maybe I'd just been blind to what had already been set in motion. The lawyer paused, letting the silence hang. It stretched long enough that I thought I might have imagined the whole scenario. But then he looked at me directly and said, She trusted you. She always trusted you. I swallowed hard, trying to process that simple truth. All the feelings of rejection, of betrayal, of loss, they didn't vanish. But they shifted slightly. From despair to cautious awareness. From emptiness to the first stirrings of agency. I left the office that day with the folder in hand, feeling heavier and lighter at once. He hadn't told me the details yet. That would come tomorrow. But even this first interaction, brief as it was, reminded me that the world wasn't done with me. That I wasn't done yet. Driving back to the motel, the sun climbing higher, I felt a strange sense of anticipation. Not hope exactly. Not yet. But a readiness. A willingness to face what she had already prepared me for. To confront the consequences of years of patience, love, and quiet endurance. I parked the car, stepped out and breathed deeply. For the first time in days, I felt like a man with a direction. Not a man with answers, but a man ready to receive them. And tomorrow I would go back. I would face whatever was waiting, not as the man who had been thrown out, but as the man who had chosen to survive. When I walked into the lawyer's office the next morning, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper. There was a quiet hum of electricity in the space, subtle but charged. I felt it in my chest, a low, persistent vibration that reminded me I was still alive, still waiting, still on the edge of discovery. He gestured to a chair. I sat, the leather cool beneath me. The folder from yesterday was on the desk. Ominous in its simplicity. Everything is in order, the lawyer began, voice calm, measured. Your wife was meticulous. She planned for every possibility, accounted for every contingency. You'll see why she trusted you in ways others didn't. I nodded slowly. My hands rested on my knees, tight, ready to curl into fists. I had no expectations. Any hope I carried was fragile. Any pride bruised. And yet, the weight of curiosity pressed against me. He opened the folder and spread the documents across the desk. The type was crisp, deliberate. My eyes darted over headings: assets, property, accounts. Numbers that meant nothing yet everything. Figures that represented decades of work, sacrifice, security. The house, he said, pointing to one document. Everything has been accounted for. Your stepson is listed as the primary heir, yes, but there are provisions you should know about. I froze slightly. Provisions? That word held promise, caution, and risk all at once. Every bank account, he continued, every property title, every investment. She was explicit. She wanted to ensure no one could make rash decisions that would harm the estate. And she also wanted to protect you. Protect me. Those words landed differently this time. Not the distant echo of someone else's care, but deliberate intention. I felt my heart thump, not from fear, but from anticipation. I leaned forward, a subtle shift in posture that mirrored the shift inside me. What kind of protection? I asked, voice quiet, tentative. He opened another document, smaller, thicker. Trust. Clauses. Designations. You are a beneficiary of certain income streams. You retain rights to the home until he reaches a specific age or condition. She detailed exactly how she wanted things to proceed. Nothing is ambiguous. Nothing is left to interpretation. I exhaled slowly. My chest loosened. Not fully relieved, but less constrained. There was a path forward. There was a plan she had left me, quietly, deliberately. The lawyer's eyes met mine. She knew him well. She knew well. She wanted to prevent conflict where possible, but also to reward foresight and patience. That was her way of ensuring stability. Stability. Another word, heavy with meaning. All these years I had been patient, quiet, enduring. Always the good man, always the silent supporter. And now, the structure she left, meticulous and deliberate, acknowledged that endurance. I didn't speak. Words felt inadequate. Any emotion I could summon seemed small compared to what she had orchestrated. Instead, I absorbed the room, the folder, the weight of her foresight. I felt the steady pulse of her presence in these documents, guiding me even from beyond. He continued, there's a clause here, specifically, regarding him, your stepson. Until certain conditions are met, he cannot sell the property or remove you. It is designed to ensure fairness and prevent impulsive actions. I allowed myself a subtle smile. Not smug. Not victorious. Just acknowledgement. Relief tempered with the calm clarity that comes from finally knowing. The power dynamic hadn't shifted violently. It had shifted subtly, deliberately, on her terms. My thoughts drifted back to him, the boy I had raised. The young man who had thrown me out of the house after the funeral. I remembered his confident posture, his dismissive tone. For the first time, I realized he had been operating on incomplete knowledge, unaware of the foundation his mother had laid for me. This realization didn't make me feel powerful. It made me feel steady, secure. Like the years of patience, love, and quiet support hadn't gone unnoticed. Not by her, not by the universe, not by myself. Anything else? I asked, though my voice sounded more controlled now. Less anxious. More measured. The lawyer glanced down at the folder. There is one more document she left for you. A personal note. She wanted you to have it after she was gone. My throat tightened. I nodded. Words failed me again. He handed me a sealed envelope, cream-colored and heavy. Her handwriting was unmistakable. I felt the weight of it in my hands. It wasn't just paper. It was intention. I took a deep breath. Every instinct in me wanted to tear it open immediately. to read every line, absorb every word. But I paused, letting the moment stretch. There was no rush. The pause itself was part of the process she had designed. She had always taught me that timing matters. "You've been very patient," the lawyer said, almost as if reading my thoughts. She would be proud. I nodded again. The small gesture meant more than words could convey. Years of quiet endurance, all recognized, all validated in a way I hadn't anticipated. I left the office slowly, the folder and envelope in my hands. The sun was higher now, spilling light across the city streets. Every shadow, every reflection, every noise seemed more vivid, sharper, more deliberate. The world felt less like a place I had been cast out from, and more like a space where clarity was finally possible. Driving back to the motel, I felt something new. Patience had weight. Experience had weight. Endurance had weight. And these weights were not burdens, they were foundations. Foundations my wife had built long before anyone else recognized the importance. When I returned to my temporary room, I placed the folder carefully on the desk. The envelope sat beside it, waiting. I didn't open it yet. That came later in my own time. Right now, the clarity was enough. The house, the accounts, the estate, it wasn't just a collection of assets. It was a testament to foresight, to planning, to love expressed not in dramatic gestures, but in deliberate, measured acts that ensured fairness and preserved dignity. I sat back in the chair and let the silence wash over me. For the first time in days, I didn't feel discarded. I felt positioned, supported, recognized. Not by anyone else, but by the person who had known me best. Tomorrow I would read the letter. Tomorrow I would begin to understand everything she had done for me, everything she had left in my care, and everything he had yet to see. And for the first time, I felt the faintest stirrings of empowerment. Not revenge. Not vindication. Just clarity. And that, I realized, was enough to begin again. I didn't open the envelope immediately. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of her handwriting, the familiar curves of her letters that had comforted me for years. The folder of legal documents lay beside me, orderly and impersonal, but this was her. This was her voice, private and intimate, reaching across the void she had left behind. I inhaled slowly, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. Curiosity and caution warred inside me. I had lived with uncertainty long enough to know that some truths demand preparation. This letter demanded nothing less. Finally, I broke the seal. The paper was thick, cream-colored, just as I remembered from our old letters. I unfolded it carefully and began to read. "My love, if you are reading this, then I am gone. I need you to know first that I loved you beyond words, beyond measure, beyond every day we spent together." Her words hit me like a tidal wave. I felt the familiar sting behind my eyes, but I let it come. Grief, even after all this time, is not a visitor. It is a companion, and she had invited me to feel it fully. "You have always been patient, steadfast, and quiet in ways that I admired and relied upon. I know the world has been cruel in moments, and I know you have carried burdens that were not yours to bear alone. But I also know your strength, and I trust it now more than ever." I paused, my thumb tracing the ink. Strength, trust. Words I had always associated with her gaze, her touch, her voice telling me I could manage, I could endure, I could survive. About him, my son, you have given more than anyone could ever ask. You've been his anchor, his guide, his silent protector. He doesn't always see it. He doesn't always appreciate it. But I do. Always have. I exhaled. Every memory of rejection, every moment of feeling discarded, every insult replayed in my mind, the harsh words, the cold dismissal, suddenly softened. Her recognition was like a balm. "I have left instructions to ensure that you are cared for, and that you have rights that no one can take away. You have earned this, not because of legal documents, but because of the life you built with love, patience, and honor." I felt something in my chest shift. Relief? Gratitude? Perhaps both. The room seemed brighter, warmer, as though the words themselves carried light. There will be moments when you wonder if it was all worth it, when the silence feels too heavy or the absence too loud. Remember this, you are never truly alone. You have left your mark on this life in ways that are permanent. And now, you will see, in time, that the balance has been maintained. That love and fairness endure even when pain arrives. I read her words twice, then a third time, each pass revealing another layer I had missed in the first read. She had foreseen everything. My anger, my grief, the tension between him and me. She had designed a way to protect both me and him, to preserve dignity, to restore fairness. Her foresight was quiet, deliberate, and astonishing. When you read this, take a deep breath. Step forward without fear. Trust yourself. Trust the process I have left in place. And remember always, I loved you. Beyond words. Beyond reason. Beyond life itself. I folded the letter carefully and held it against my chest. My eyes blurred. My hands were trembling, but this time it was not from fear. It was from understanding. From clarity. From the realization that she had thought of everything, every possibility, every contingency, every outcome. And she had thought of me. I glanced at the folder again. The legal details were important, yes. But this letter, it was more than paper. It was a bridge. A lifeline. A compass pointing me forward, toward both my own future and the one I had shared with her. I sat back in the chair, closed my eyes, and allowed myself to breathe fully for the first time in weeks. Not just as a widower, not just as a man discarded, not just as a father figure unacknowledged, but as someone recognized, honored, and guided even in absence. The room was silent except for the quiet ticking of the clock. And yet I could hear her voice clearly, whispering in the space between words, between memories, between the folds of that letter. Encouraging, reassuring, loving. I knew what I had to do next. The stepson, the boy I had raised, would have to see the truth. Not in anger. Not in confrontation. But in clarity. In fairness. In a way that would finally illuminate the effort, love, and endurance I had invested in the family he now inherited. The letter had done more than inform. It had empowered. It had shifted the ground beneath me. I was no longer reacting. I was stepping forward, deliberate and steady, ready to reclaim not just my rightful place but my sense of self. I folded the letter once more, tucked it safely in my jacket, and picked up the folder. The path ahead was still uncertain, still fraught with potential conflict. But now I had guidance. Now I had purpose. Now I had her voice, steady and unwavering, with me every step of the way. Tomorrow I would confront him. Tomorrow I would assert the truth. Tomorrow I would finally be seen, not as a man who had been cast aside, but as a man who had endured, who had loved, and who had been honored in ways even he could not yet understand. For the first time in days I smiled. Not triumphantly. Not arrogantly. But quietly, firmly, with the knowledge that I was ready. I arrived at the house just as the afternoon sun hit the front steps, casting long shadows that felt like an audience waiting for me to stumble. The keys in my pocket felt heavier than they should, a constant reminder that my presence here had been denied, yet now I held a legal and moral claim to everything I had lost. I paused at the door, inhaled, and tried to steady my racing thoughts. Anger? Fear? Relief? All of it tangled together, knotting tight in my chest. But underneath there was something else, clarity. The letter, the will, her careful instructions, they had given me more than possessions. They had given me purpose. I rang the doorbell. Moments later, he appeared, tall and confident, as if the world belonged to him, as if my recent eviction had been nothing but a footnote. "Can I help you?" His voice was controlled, almost icy, a direct echo of the man who had thrown me out weeks ago. I looked him in the eyes, letting silence stretch before speaking. "We need to talk." Inside. He hesitated, and for a brief moment, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. Then he stepped aside, wordless, letting me pass. The living room smelled of his comfort and authority, clean, expensive, deliberately arranged. I placed the folder on the table and pulled the envelope from my jacket. "I received this," I said, voice calm but steady. "From your mother." He glanced at it, and I could see a twitch of recognition, curiosity, maybe even guilt, surfacing beneath his composure. I think it's time you understood, I continued. Everything she planned, everything she left behind, it wasn't just paperwork. It was guidance. It was protection. And it affects both of us. He crossed his arms, a defensive gesture, but I didn't flinch. You mean the house, the money, the inheritance? He asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. Yes, I said. But more than that. She trusted me and she trusted you, but she also made sure fairness is preserved. That no one can act recklessly. That we both are accounted for. I opened the envelope and placed the letter on the table between us. His eyes followed every movement. I let him read silently, letting the weight of her words settle on both of us. Minutes passed. The only sound was the quiet ticking of a clock and the distant hum of the air conditioner. His expression changed, at first disbelief, then tension, then something softer, almost shame. Finally he spoke. I didn't know. His voice cracked slightly, betraying the carefully constructed mask he wore for so long. I know, I said softly. You didn't. And that's not your fault. But now you do. And now we have a choice, how we move forward. The room was heavy with unspoken words, years of misunderstanding, and the tension of confrontation. Yet beneath it all, I felt a surprising calm. I had waited for this moment. I had endured. I had prepared myself, thanks to her foresight and guidance. I shouldn't have said those things, he admitted, voice low. After the funeral. I thought it was mine now. That I don't know. That I had the right to push you out. I nodded slowly. You thought you had the right. But she made it clear, there are rules. There is fairness. And I'm still here. We can navigate this together, or we can continue the way we were. But the past doesn't have to dictate the future. He looked down, running a hand through his hair. I could see the conflict, the anger, the guilt. For the first time, the arrogance that had fueled his dismissal of me wavered. I see that now, he muttered. I was wrong. I didn't understand. You weren't ready, I said, soft but firm. I know why you acted the way you did. But now we have clarity. We have guidance. And we have a chance to get it right. He exhaled, a slow release of tension that seemed to carry years of resentment and misunderstanding. I realized in that moment that confrontation isn't always about proving power, it's about creating understanding. And that understanding is a fragile, delicate thing that can only survive if both sides are willing to embrace it. I placed a hand on the folder, then the letter. She trusted us both. I trust you. Let's honor that. Not because it's convenient, not because it's expected, but because it's right. He nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly, but it was enough. Enough to know the shift had begun. For the first time since the funeral, I felt like I was standing on level ground. Not just in the legal sense, but in the emotional, in the moral. I had faced him. I had asserted the truth. And I had done so not with anger or vengeance, but with clarity, dignity, and love. We spent the next hour discussing the logistics, the will, the trusts, the property, but beneath that, there was a subtle realignment. An acknowledgement that the past was no longer a weapon, but a lesson. And that, for the first time, our relationship could be rebuilt on terms that honored everyone, especially the woman who had orchestrated this entire reconciliation from beyond. As I left the house later that evening, the sun dipping low behind the trees, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected. The confrontation had not been explosive. It hadn't required drama. But it had required presence, patience, and courage, the very qualities she had always believed I possessed. And now I understood fully. She hadn't just protected me financially. She had protected me emotionally. She had ensured that I would face the conflict, understand the truth, and step forward with integrity. That lesson, more than any inheritance, was the legacy she left behind. The morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and warm, carrying with it the quiet promise of something new. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in my hands, feeling the calm settle around me in a way it hadn't since the funeral. The house was still, but it no longer felt empty. It felt owned, not just by property rights or legal papers, but by the understanding, clarity, and quiet empowerment I had reclaimed. The stepson had left early, off to handle tasks that now fell to both of us, but the air between us was different. There was respect, a tentative acknowledgement that the dynamic had shifted. Not in dominance, not in control, but in awareness. We were beginning again on honest terms. I picked up the letter again, the words still fresh in my mind. She had planned for this moment. Meticulously, deliberately, lovingly. Everything had been set in motion to ensure fairness, recognition, and growth. And now, after all the confrontation and revelations, I understood fully what she had done for me, for him, and for the balance she had worked to preserve. I walked through the house slowly, noticing the small details I had taken for granted. The way the sunlight hit the living room floor. The sound of the refrigerator humming. The subtle creak of the stairs. Each sound, each shadow, each corner was no longer a reminder of loss but a canvas of possibility. I felt a sense of pride, not the hollow pride of wealth or ownership, but the quiet, grounded pride that comes from enduring, understanding, and choosing to act with integrity. I had survived being discarded. I had faced confrontation without losing composure. I had reclaimed my identity, my dignity, and my voice. There was still work to be done. Emotional mending, practical decisions, and the continued challenge of redefining the relationship with my stepson. But for the first time, I felt ready. Ready to engage fully, with honesty and patience, to guide and be guided in turn. To establish boundaries and offer support without losing myself in the process. I brewed another cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the world wake up. Neighbors walked their dogs, children played along the sidewalks, cars hummed by. Life carried on, indifferent yet beautiful, and I was part of it, not as a shadow, not as a discarded figure, but as a man who had endured, learned, and emerged stronger. The letter remained folded beside my cup, a silent reminder that love can be deliberate, patient, and transformative. That recognition and guidance, even in absence, can reshape our trajectory. And that endurance, clarity, and integrity are rewards far greater than any material inheritance. I smiled quietly to myself, feeling the weight in my chest shift from grief to gratitude, from loss to possibility. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was mine to navigate, with understanding, patience, and the quiet confidence that I had faced the deepest pain and emerged ready to live fully. I glanced toward the stepson's room and felt something I hadn't expected: hope. A fragile, tentative hope that together we could redefine our relationship, honoring her memory, and building a new foundation not just for coexistence, but for mutual respect and understanding. I knew there would be challenges ahead. Old habits, misunderstandings, and emotions long buried might rise. But I also knew that I had been prepared for this, trained by love and foresight to meet the world not in reaction, but in deliberate, thoughtful engagement. Rising from the table, I felt a lightness in my step. The weight of rejection, the sting of betrayal, the ache of grief, they were still there, like faint echoes, but they no longer dictated my existence. I carried them as reminders, as lessons, not as shackles. I opened the front door and stepped outside. The sun was fully up now, warm on my face, illuminating the path ahead. I inhaled deeply, savoring the air, the light, the quiet strength that had returned to me. This was not the end of my journey, but the beginning of a new chapter, one written with patience, guided by love, and grounded in integrity. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I believed in tomorrow.